Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of the Jets Life podcast. And here we are, another Monday and another day, another week of just living the Jets life. As I mentioned last week, following that victory against Houston, you just had the feeling that this was gonna just be what it was. They wanted to bring us back in for just a little bit of time, just to kind of come out and just play the worst game of the season after playing the best game against Houston. And where it leaves us, that the season is now officially over. Yes, I know it was over weeks ago, when we just kept losing. Really, that the window that I looked at was the Buffalo Miami weeks. I feel like we had to win one of, if not both of those games, to really keep ourselves in the hunt. When that didn't happen, you just kind of knew the writing was pretty much on the wall of what the season was going to be and what it is. It's the 13th straight season of us missing the playoffs. Another season of disappointment, another season of all the optimism just kind of flushing down the toilet. It really is probably, by far, as a fan, the most disappointing season that I've had as a fan. Going into the season with all Super Bowl aspirations, this team is great. This team is amazing. With the star players on offense, with the star players on defense, you really had a vision that this could be a top five, top 10 team in the league for this season. But when Aaron Rodgers went down and all the injuries to the offensive line started to mount, it just became more and more glaring that this team is more of a problem than we all kind of envisioned. And when you look at it, you look around the league, every single team battles through injuries. It's just the nature of the way it is. Um, and all these teams have great depth, and that depth comes from drafting, um, you know, good players that you can eventually kind of run through the system, and then eventually, like when your starters have to either get paid or leave through free agency, you have that next guy come up, who's been in your system for a few years. Well, we don't have that, and we haven't had that, and where it's the most apparent is in this offensive line. This offensive line flat out stinks. It's bad. It's terrible. It's awful. I understand however many offensive line combinations we've had. Understand really no team can survive that. But, you know, the issues yesterday were not on the side that you would have expected the issues to be at. The issues yesterday started came on the left side. Mekhi Becton and Laken Tomlinson were getting destroyed yesterday. It was by far the worst I've seen. I mean, Laken Tomlinson since coming over here has been a major disappointment. I was very happy with that signing. I thought we were getting a guy who just coming off a Pro Bowl season, um, that would come in here and really help stabilize the interior of that offensive line. Um, Mixed with ABT, you really kind of thought they had that guard combination situation set for at least the duration of Laken Tomlinson's contract. But he has not been the same player. It really comes out to me that maybe his success in San Francisco had a lot more to do with the guy playing to his left than it was himself. Um, it just that is by far the most disappointing thing that I can really point out is that offensive line, the left side, the side with Mekhi Becton, Joe Douglas's first draft pick as a general manager for this team, the guy that he picked to be the potential anchor for this offensive line on the left side, um, a guy who in his fourth year after missing two full seasons um, with injuries was playing a good season this year and just played his flat out worst game as a pro. I mean, I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts to that. Um, you know, it's a guy that I really kind of thought maybe still had, some sort of pitcher in this franchise, and maybe he still does. Um, but I cannot see a situation where that left side with Tomlinson and Becton can be like your primaries going into next season. The Jets need to figure out this offensive line. They need to figure it out quickly because that is really what's going to what can really drive this team back to where we are this year in 2024. Aaron Rodgers playing behind this offensive line would just be would be malpractice, and I cannot see how really you look at this situation and you can look at Joe Douglas and really kind of trust the direction of this team moving forward. We have good players on this team. I'm not saying anything about that. He's been better than previous GMs. I can't disagree with that. But to sit here and say that he's come in and made us a better team than we were a few years ago is not saying as much as some people might think. This team was awful when he came into the picture. Yes, 100%. It's been well documented. But you see situations around the league over and over, and it happens all the time, of general managers coming in and within that 2-year window really have a good kind of grasp on the roster that they've accumulated and can kind of portray that into wins moving forward. The fact that this guy is just getting a a free pass on this disgrace, um, him and Robert Saleh included. The fact that both these guys are just shoot in potentially to be our GM and coach going into next season because of the simple fact they failed on a second overall pick at quarterback and were able to manipulate and not manipulate, maybe is the wrong word, convince Aaron Rodgers to come to this team. Yes, good sales pitch. I mean, whatever they did there, perfect. They're going to need to bring that times 100 in this offseason because there's no way in my there's no way. There's no way that this playoff drought can reach 14 years and these guys still be in charge. I would argue that there should be real legitimate conversations this offseason with who the coaching and who the GM is going to be next season because the fact that this team is just coming out absolutely flat on numerous occasions when hype is was through the roof going into the season, it's just it's irresponsible. It's reached a point that you just can't fathom it. You just don't understand what is going on anymore. How did yesterday happen? How did it happen after you know this team should have been energized a little bit after that game in Houston. This team should have been optimistic potentially with the fact that they were still holding on to that 1% or whatever it was chance to make the playoffs and the potential Aaron Rodgers return in in days away potentially. He could have been playing on Christmas Eve is the potential reports. That's not happening anymore. And if it does then I think it kind of adds a little more like fuel to the fire of what the hell is this team doing? What is the point? What would be the point at this point to put him out there? The only benefit I would have said is if they were still alive, to see him for few weeks potentially with a little glimmer of hope alive and, playing with these players, maybe this offense looks different, but it won't look different with him right now. It'll look marginally better. But this offensive line is that damn bad. Yes, maybe he'll make the quick read, he'll make the quick throws, he'll do that. But those things get taken away by good defenses, and at some point, you're gonna have to hold on to the ball for an extra second and allow something to open up, and this offensive line does not allow for him to do that. Does not allow for anybody to do that. Like, I'm not putting yesterday on Zach Wilson. That's that would just be the easy thing to do. I'm past that. Zach Wilson is not our quarterback. He had a good game last week. Proud of him for that. Maybe he turns that into something that he can build on his confidence somewhere else. It's not here. It's not here because of multiple reasons. It's not here because his fan base just won't trust him. It's not here because, whatever truth or whatever it was behind the whole reluctance situation, there's something there. And the fact that this organization kind of took that in and still allowed him to play when something out there existed and didn't handle that situation. I understand Trevor Simeon's garbage. I understand Tim Boyle is not a good quarterback. I understand all that. But if Zach was really reluctant to play because of his own health, and I do understand that too. If he's if this team has put something out there that they don't envision him as the future at quarterback, which I think the writing was on the wall for that before the season even started. When the Jets went out and got 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers, I think that you're pretty kind of clear as to what the direction this team is going into. They're going with Aaron Rodgers, um, and then you really need to show your ass over the next couple of seasons, and maybe you'll have a shot at this roster. Um, but it just it's kind of laughable that everything that this front office has done to this point, you can't tell me that there's a situation where you really think that this team is better now than it was before Joe Douglas got here. From roster's perspective, again, we are a better roster, sure. But in his first year, where he had nothing to do with the roster at the time, maybe he made a couple of waiver wire acquisitions. It was the year after the McCagnon draft, and the McCagnon spent $100 million. It was the CJ Mosley first year, whatever it was. Um, in that year, the Darnold year where he got mono and all that fun around that. In that year, the Jets went 7-9. Since then, we've had 7 wins once last year. And even in that year, we were 7-4 and collapsed. A late season collapse. The type of collapse that you really kind of look at this team and you would look at the people responsible and kind of say what went wrong. And yes, we understand the quarterback position. That was the easy target, and it always is. But the guy in charge the last couple of years, as a, as far as a guy to get this team ready, week in and week out, is Robert Saleh. And this team continues to have situations where they just do not look prepared. They were not prepared yesterday. And if they were and lost 30 nothing, that's even worse. And it's reaching a point where, for me personally, and the easy kind of answer here is the head coach needs to go. But then you look at what does that mean? Who are the options? If I'm a head coach candidate, and there's options out there, like we would think Chicago would probably be an option. You would think Carolina is going to be an option, considering they already fired their coach. Maybe Oakland would be an option. Sorry, Las Vegas, the Raiders. The Chargers are a definite option. I mean, outside of Aaron Rodgers for 1 year potentially, what makes this position at all attractive? You have a historically terrible offensive line, coupled with a historically bad offense. Um, is Nate Hackett going to be kind of forced into being able to stay for another season? For all the positivity that Aaron Rodgers brought to this team, he did bring over a little cloud. I will say that because unfortunately, I think this is what we're dealing with next year. I think we're dealing with Robert Saleh as our head coach, Nate Hackett's our offensive coordinator, and Joe Douglas is our GM. But the the training wheels need to be completely off on this entire front office, and this GM, um, he's taken methodical approach in free agency, that has brought in some good players, but has also kind of brought in some questionable players. That cannot be the case anymore. He needs to make that home run. He needs to bring in those guys. How many players in the last offseason did you hear were almost Jets? Fletcher Cox, Orlando Brown supposedly had some interest with joining the Jets until he eventually signed elsewhere. And um, you know, offensive lines, you see it all the time, get fixed within a matter of seasons. In some cases, you look at the Kansas City Chiefs that year after Tampa, when Mahomes was basically running away for his life, as the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl to Brady and the Bucks. They were able to fix the offensive line. The year after the Super Bowl, a couple years ago, where Joe Burrow was running for his life, um, before eventually kind of falling apart and losing the Super Bowl. Not falling apart. They lost by the one score, which should have been a touchdown. But again, the offensive line allowed Aaron Donald right in there on a fourth down to end the game. Um, they were able to kind of reinvigorate their offensive line. But the difference between the Jets situation and those guys' situations is that they were able to get an offensive line revamp by offering multiple high-end players, um, multi-year contracts at significant value, while their quarterback was still on a rookie deal. And another thing that quarterback was going to be under center for multiple years after that, because those teams believe that they had found their franchise quarterbacks, and rightfully so. We have a guy that's, you know, not our franchise quarterback. He's not going to be here for more than potentially next year, and that's it. Maybe he sticks around for a third year with us, but again, for somebody to come in here, they'd have to believe, one, they're going to a winning organization. They don't No offensive line's gonna wanna come here and, kind of see that vision of Aaron Rodgers gone in a couple years and who's next. Obviously money talks, but we all know the way that Joe Douglas is operated. Finances are important to him, but rightfully so. We don't want some guy who's going out there and spending crazy money. But in the same sense, this is a win now window, and the future does not look bright after that. Truly, after this season, if Rodgers doesn't return, there's a major cloud over this organization. They'd have to really quickly figure out who their quarterback is going to be, and there are definitely options out there. We've seen it. The Bucks, kind of went over to Baker Mayfield, and he's not great by any means, but he can at least kind of operate an offense when there's skilled players around it. The Jets just don't have that on offense. They just don't. They don't have that. It's unfortunate. They just don't have much on offense that you can be proud of as a fan. I'm not proud of it. Nobody should be proud of it. Uh, um, and when you really kind of look at that, there really isn't much positivity to look forward to. And that's the worst thing about this game, is that you look at a team like the Dolphins, and you look at a team like the Bills, and you look at a team like the Patriots, who are terrible this year, but at least they're kind of in a tank situation and may end up getting a quarterback for their future. And here we are, the Jets, looking at 1 year with Rodgers and then a huge question mark after that. Um, it just seems like the writing is on the wall of what this all is going to look like. But you know, we haven't seen Aaron Rodgers throw a football really at all in live action outside of a preseason game. Um, so it's a little hard for me to kind of envision what he's going to look like with this team around him. Garrett Wilson's a great player. Are they going to bring in another receiver to kind of pair with him? It's going to be difficult when you have to allocate more resources to an offensive line that has just been every word of awful that you can kind of find in the dictionary. It is just absolutely a disgrace. I did some research on this, and this offensive line, and you can say what you want about the pass blocking. A lot of times, you can say it comes down to the quarterback holding the ball for too long. Um, if teams come with a blitz and the offensive line can't pick it up, um, you know, different things happen. You know, on pass plays that make it a little difficult for the offensive line. So, I'm not going to put all that pressure there. But what I will point out, when you look at this offensive line, and it's been a major issue for the Jets all season long. Um, Going back to the bye week, going back all the way to the Giants game, I'm going to give you a rundown of every single game's rushing yards. Um, 58, 64. We had an outlier of a game against the Raiders, where we rushed for 108 yards. Keep in mind, in that game, Zach Wilson himself rushed for 54 yards. So if you take that part out, 54 rushing yards, by other players. Buffalo, 63. Miami, 29. Atlanta, 62. Houston, 79. Miami again, 23. The key to this offense is running the football, and this offense cannot do it. They can't run the football, which makes it too easy for defenses to just, and it's not even a matter of like teams are just playing basic defense. You don't see like anything crazy happening. Yeah, obviously on the run obvious downs, they got a couple extra guys in the box, but damn, like every team does that. It's not like it's not a big mystery that every team, on first down will put an extra guy in the box. Um, if it's a good quarterback, they're gonna probably put that safety a little back and then kind of hope that their front seven can kind of play, within the structure of a base defense and kind of play a hat to a hat um, on the defensive side. But damn, what this offensive line cannot do is open up running lanes. And it's been apparent how many times have we seen Brees Hall get tackled behind the line of scrimmage. I do feel like when I see Brees Hall play, it's a little less um, less of what I saw from him like in the Buffalo game. Like that first game of the year, you saw him hitting that hole kind of quickly. And obviously this offensive line is major, you know, has battled major injuries and stuff like that. To where obviously you would expect a fallback, but there's no for that to be the case, for this team to just, struggle to reach 80 yards rushing at all over the past I mean, how many games did I point that out? I guess that was from the bye week, so 3, 4, 8 games. 8 games and you passed 80 yards one time and that was because your quarterback ran for 54 of those yards. It's a major problem. It's a major problem for a guy like Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, who have been preaching, building this thing through the trenches. Well, you may have got it unlocked on one side of the football, but you really just failed on the other side. This offensive line is absolutely a disgrace. Joe Douglas, who came in here and there was a big um, Connor Rogers, in the SNY post game had a had take made this take like pretty much, you know, hit it right on the spot. Um, he came in here and he was supposed to build his offensive line around Sam Darnold, and all these years later, two quarterbacks later specifically, he even picked his own quarterback. All this time later, and this offensive line is still a problem. It's going to be the problem for a long time. We saw it on Hard Knocks. Robert Saleh kind of calling out the offensive line. This is your first chance to prove to the world that this isn't the same old shit, same old story, whatever the hell he was talking about. Um, and they never got the message, unfortunately, because here we are, 3 games left in the season, and you can't look at this team and say that they're anything close to what we were expecting them to be. Um, the expectations got to take a little ramp up. I again, I truly believe that there should be conversations in that building, and I hope there are, about the future of this team and who's going to lead it. Because it's not looking pretty right now. Does not look pretty. When you look at, you know, use a put on your binoculars and look 3 years in the future. I don't know what this team looks like. I don't. I mean, things keep going the way it's going. I mean, it, it's just really unfortunate. You have guys like Garrett Wilson who are just frustrated that they're a part of this offense that just absolutely stinks. A guy that really all of us like had that ambitions of him being a potential 13, 1400 yard receiver. I thought he had more of that in him because I followed him watching Ohio State games from back um, when he was there. I basically followed him throughout most of his college career, watching a lot of Ohio State games. He's a player that I circled before the draft as the player that I really was hoping the Jets would pull a trigger on. When they brought him in, I was super excited about it, and he has even exceeded my expectations as a rookie. I didn't think, with the way that season was going, that he would break that 1,000-yard season, and he did. The touchdowns were down, but obviously, you have to score touchdowns in order for one of your receivers to be able to get touchdowns, and it's just completely unfortunate. He's an outstanding player, and he's surrounded by this disgusting offense, this stench of a terrible offense. Brees Hall, same thing. A guy who's a legit home run hitter, should be able to be 1,000-yard back, and he came and rushed for 80 yards a game because his offensive line is just that terrible. Um, it's just unfortunate. Teams accidentally rush for big gains, and this team just 2 or 3 yards a clip. I mean, when you see him rush for 8 yards, it's like it's just unfortunate for a coach that preaches about explosive plays. Well, yesterday was exactly what you were not looking for. You went up against a team that exploded all over the place, and you guys did absolutely nothing. Nothing. I think there was a point in the game where they had 3 yards, and it was like late in the second quarter. think they ended the game with like 103 yards total. It is literally in 2023 when there are rules built around the offense being more successful than defense, and we cannot figure that shit out. It is just a complete disgrace. It's so unfortunate. Um, Jet fans is once again another season of us just looking at what crap there is around this team, and it's the same old crap. It really is. Every single season, it's the shit. Same shit, different season. It just really is. 13 straight years. 13 years of no playoffs. And with this staff, 3 years. 3 years of no playoffs. I understand the quarterback went down, but we are seeing it everywhere in the league. Indianapolis, quarterback went down. Minshew came in. They're in the playoff hunt. Even yesterday, Houston, after CJ Stroud goes out, they go out there and they win a game in overtime with Case Keenum. Um, and we saw it from the Vikings. I think the Vikings run like their looks like their 15th quarterback. And they're in the playoff hunt. I don't know. It's just crazy. Cincinnati. I don't know why I forgot about them. Jake Browning looking like Joe Burrow. It looks like the offense didn't skip a beat. But we have that. We this coaching staff and this front office and everyone in that building has the benefit of the Aaron Rodgers excuse. Just just a disgrace. Just a disgrace. Disgrace from all fronts. They should have figured out the problem much sooner in the season. They should have done something. You want to blame the injury bug? Be my guest. It's just so unfortunate. It 2 years in a row of just one season, just a utter collapse. Season two, just no fire. Just no fire from this coaching staff to the players. The players have been playing their tails off on defense. I cannot. I just can't believe I'm having this conversation when this defense has been that great all season. Yes, they had a terrible game last year. I'm sorry, last week. This week, they had a terrible game this week. But man, like how they haven't quit on this team already is just you know amazing to me. It just they've reached a point here, with 3 games left, there really is nothing to play for. I really just don't see anything. There's nothing to play for. Um, the best situation for this team is if they get as high as a draft pick as possible, and I am not one to root against losses, but wins are just not going to do us any good either. The only thing that wins are going to do is just add a little bit more of a reason why this coaching staff deserves another shot, and I just don't think they do. And maybe losses are what will make things clear to the front office or to the ownership that they got it wrong, and they got it wrong again. Since Herm Edwards, it's been Herm Edwards was a good coach. Eric Mangini was a good coach, had that failure of a season, and they pulled the trigger on firing him. In my opinion, that was the right move. Run Rex Ryan, huge. Brought in that charisma, brought in that positive energy. Just hoorah guy you, as they like to say, run through a wall for. And that team did to the point where they had Mark Sanchez as a quarterback. And I respect Mark what he did in those playoff seasons, but let's be honest, he was not an NFL caliber top end quarterback that should have been going into the playoffs and beating Peyton Manning and beating Tom Brady and beating I forget who else he beat in those 2 playoff runs, but it was that's right, the Chargers, and beating Carson Palmer. I mean, it wasn't the type of player that you really expected to come out here and do that stuff. But behind that defense and behind that running game and behind that offensive line and behind, you know, a slew of great players, that was a great team that was anchored by, Nick Mangold and Shaw Ferguson, both, players that the Jets picked in the same draft. Mike Tannenbaum, I think that was his first draft as a GM, if I'm not mistaken. Said, let's get this offensive line figured out. I don't want to worry about it for years and years and years. Well, Joe Douglas has taken a similar approach. In his first draft, he took Mekhi Becton. In his second draft, he took Elijah Vera Tucker. In now his was this third or fourth? Fourth. He took Joe Tippmann. He's made the picks on offensive line, early draft picks. He's made those picks. It just not has turned out. It has not turned out to be nearly as efficient as what we saw from the Jets in the early 2000s. Um, I was going Rex Ryan to Todd Bowles to Adam Gates to now Robert Saleh. And it just seems like year in, year out, this front office, this ownership has not figured out how to hire people who can run a football team. And it's sad to say. I mean, I was really kind of reaching a point where I was thinking that, with the good drafts that Joe Douglas had and the season that Robert Saleh put together last year, and even as late as the Philly game this year, the fact that he had this team kind of still going, what were we at the time, 3-3 or whatever it was, with a chance to kind of do something, and just again the wheels just fell off again, again, just another week, another season of disappointment. Jets are again officially eliminated from the playoffs, and all we have to look forward to is the what ifs. And with 3 games left, best possible situation that happens here is some clarity comes up of what the leadership on this team, and hopefully that opens the eyes of Woody Johnson, Christopher Johnson, whoever is up there, kind of helping make that final decision. Somebody whistle in his ear that this is not working. It's not working, and like I said, unfortunately, the thing that makes it the most difficult is what's your next option. But that'll be a conversation for another day. Jeff fans, if you haven't already, please take time to just like and subscribe to my channel. Your support is highly appreciated, and like to sign off usually with "Let's go Jets," but not much to be amped up about. But I'll do it anyway. Let's go Jets.